So today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. Wasn't quite in the mood to do an episode review, not because of the episode itself, I haven't seen it yet actually. I've just been kind of busy and I wanted something fairly quick and easy to get out. It's not going to be quick and easy, but I'm convincing myself it is. So this is a video I've been meaning to make for a couple years or so now. I have like a list of just like videos that I want to make, and this has been on there for a very long time. So let's talk about my favorite Vanguard characters. Let's go. So yeah, I have a list in front of me, 10 Vanguard characters that I really like in no particular order, not really, and I'm just gonna talk about them, give my opinions of them, explain why I like them. You'll notice there's probably a few patterns and trends in there because I'm a person with opinions. This is a very biased list. This is my favorite ones, of course, and it's gonna take a while, so let's just get straight into it. We're beginning with one of the topical ones to get it out of the way. Nanami. Nanami is a character that I didn't really care for. When I saw the first promotional images in the first couple episodes of the anime, I thought I kind of had her all pegged out. I was like, oh, she's just like typical snobby, sarcastic, like villain, right? She's not really going to leave an impact. She's just going to be there to fill time while Asuka and Shin get all the actual plot and character development. And funnily enough, something really cool happened. Nanami was a character that slowly changed as time progressed. And that's the important part, the slowly parts, because any character can change, of course, character development. That's the point of having stories. The thing that really stands out about Nanami specifically is the fact that she slowly changes. She's a character with a fairly basic backstory of, she starts off really competent at everything. She constantly wins card fights, but then one day she's beaten by Asuka. And because of this, she kind of pledges the rest of her life to impressing Asuka, the one person who could finally beat her. Because of this, Asuka sends her out with Fujinomi to fight against Shin and the others in an attempt to get Card Capital. But by trying to defeat Shin and his friends, and by trying to win Card Capital, she ends up spending a lot of time with him and ends up starting to really like them. And she finds herself at this crossroads of, well, which side do I side with? And the beautiful part of this, the part of it that really works, is that it's never really hammered on the head. It's done with some subtlety. It's never the focus of the episode. It's always just the thing that's happening in the background, and it leads to the audience just inferring this, which is great because that's what great writing is. It's show don't tell. We see Nanami go from this character who is like a kind of over-the-top comedic snobby villain that we feel like we know everything about, and slowly over time see her become more and more personal, more and more friendly, and it's great. And again, it's the fact that it's done with a little bit of subtlety that makes it feel so down to earth and compelling, and because of that I really like Nanami. So next, number 9 on this list is Kourin Tatsunagi. One other Tatsunagi character makes it onto the list later on, and you've probably figured out who that other one is. But Suiko didn't make it in just because of a reason I'll actually get into, a reason that ties into Kourin. See, Kourin and Suiko both start off, and Ultra Rare in general, start off as very detached. In the first 2 story arcs, whenever we see them, they're always kind of in their own bubble and they feel off. And this creates a really compelling dynamic of them being idols, characters who act very over the top and happy and everything. But yet, whenever no one's looking, they start acting really quiet and detached. And it's cool. It gives them this very weird vibe. Like, for example, their card shop, the one they own, it doesn't look like a card shop. It's always empty, and it has like a bar in it, and it's like weirdly purple. It doesn't look like anything like a card shop ever looks like, and it gives them this air of sort of like detachment, like they're not really human. And the cool thing that separates the original Vanguard from the reboot is that the original never tells us this, it just shows us it. We get the feeling that something's up with them, whereas the reboot just gives us a backstory going, yes, you're right, they're not human. Not really anyway. Kourin and Suiko at that point kind of feel like the same character to each other, and unfortunately Suiko just kind of stops there. She stops growing and changing at that point. Luckily, the next story arc of the anime, Cardfight Vanguard If, is going to be a bit more focused on her, so hopefully we do get some cool stuff to do with her. But Kourin gets interesting when Link Joker happens. In Link Joker, she's forced to go to school, and she joins the Cardfight Club, and she starts to befriend Ichi, Naoki, and the other members, and she hates it. It slowly eats her up inside. She knows that she's not fully human and she doesn't fit in, and she knows that this can't end well for her, and yet she still can't stop herself from falling for this group of friends. And she knows something's gonna come in and ruin it all, and it does. And the best part is that in the original Vanguard, she gets taken by Link Joker, she ends up protecting Ichi as part of Legion Mate, and she gets her memories wiped. The second she realizes fully that she's fallen for this group of friends and she just wants to be human, nope, she's not allowed to have a happy ending. It's very tragic and bittersweet. And again, the reboot cops out on this and does give her her happy ending, which kind of sucks. But man, that bittersweet ending with Kourin, and the fact that they so beautifully built up to it with this kind of air of dread. I've never seen an anime so successfully make a character befriending someone else so scary, because Kourin knows, the anime knows, this ain't ending well for them. And it just makes you so unnerved during the moments where they do get along. And it's beautiful. It's so good. Next is Mikuru Shindo, and following the tragedy, I guess, plotline, Mikuru Shindo is a character who also is kind of tragic, but what makes her stand out is it's done in such a different way. See, we meet Mikuru Shindo in Cardfight Vanguard G. She is an old adult auntie who looks after Chrono, or she would if she didn't have such a busy job, a business job, the most boring and generic kind of job for a Japanese person to have. And it takes up so much time that whenever she's outside of that job, she's sleeping. She can't look after this nephew that she's supposed to. On top of that, the reason she's looking after the nephew, her brother just mysteriously went missing. Now, the way G presents this is fairly boring, but what makes it good is episode 4 of the Shinemon arc. This is how you do prequel storylines well. You take this character that we don't really care for, and you make us retroactively care, because she gets given that moment. She gets given that chance. She gets given the chance to become an idol and have a really good life. She gets the chance of having a job that she wants. She gets to live the glitzy glamour life, singing, dressing up, working for Essica, and she says no. And because she says no, she doesn't realize it yet, but her saying no there has ruined her life forever. And I would say more, but I do have an entire episode 4 review that I'll link down, where I talk about it in more detail. Okay, so the next character is Shion Kiba. Shion is a character who, in Cardfight Vanguard G, we don't really learn much about. He comes off as very kind of plain and bland. He's one of the 3 main characters, and yet he just doesn't really get given much. He is just a character that we know as being rich, and that's about it. That's his main defining character trait. He has money. He's from a prestiged family. And that's about it. He's not even really a jackass about it either. He's kind of humble, surprisingly. And while this combo of being rich but humble is a little bit unique, it's also very bland and forgettable. And you may be thinking, okay, well, why is he on your list in the first place? And the reason for that is Gears Crisis. Because Gear Crisis is a self-aware story arc, and when, oh, the only thing you know about Shion is the fact that he's rich, what if we take that away from him? Now what happens? And boy, that was one of the turning points. That's one of those moments where you're like, ooh, I want to see where this goes. And luckily they go some pretty interesting places with it. Shion gets tricked out of his family's fortune. In fact, his entire family does. But it's Shion's fault. He gets too hot-headed, he bets it all on a card fight, and he loses. And he just kind of has to put up with that. His family try to find a way of coping with it, while Shion actually kind of gets down to business and tries to earn it back. And in the process, he becomes a student who gets mentored by Kai, of all people. And this is a very fan servicey moment. Oh wow, what if Kai was a mentor to one of the G characters? Sure, let's do that. And it works though, because Kai's like harsh bluntness really brings out a lot of Shion, and we finally learn who Shion really is under all that money. He's hot-headed, he's determined, he's very brash, but he knows his stuff. And I would go further than that, but I know I've been spoiling the character's arc so far pretty majorly, but if you haven't seen how Shion's arc ends up wrapping up in Stridegate and Next, yeah, you better go see that, because it's good. Now, this is probably going to be the most surprising on the list. Number 6 on my list, in no particular order. This is a character I like just as much as the other 9. Maybe the others are a little surprising. Maybe you thought Makura was a little surprising. Maybe you thought Shion was a little surprising. This one is the one that I wrote down, and he's been one of my favorites for years now, but I don't see anyone else spreading love for him. Number 6 on my list is Yuuta Izaki. Now you may be thinking, because I see a lot of people think this, wait, isn't he just a background character who does nothing? And yeah, for the most part, he's just a background character who does nothing. He's there to fill in the crowd, basically. He is a background character through and through. He's a character who doesn't really get given much to do. If I told anyone else to describe anything about Yuuta Izaki, they'd probably just go, he's Morikawa's friend, I think? Yeah, that's Izaki, right? That most of you probably wouldn't even be able to name him until I brought up his name just now. Yeah. That's Izaki. Izaki, and this is another video I've been meaning to make for a while. Izaki is the focus of my favorite episode of the entire franchise. My favorite episode of Cardfight Vanguard is an episode in Link Joker where Ichi and Izaki card fight as part of a tournament, and everyone thinks they go into the card fight knowing how it's going to end. It's a tournament, 2 teams against each other. One of the teams has Kai in it, and the other has Ichi. Everyone's expecting big things. What happens if the shoe-in winner, Ichi Sendo, one of the strongest card fighters in the entire world, goes against this character who is the stereotype of weakness? He's so bland, he's so forgettable, his design is intentionally forgettable, and honestly so is his name. He comes off as nothing. You wanna know what happens? He comes very close to winning, and that moment is mind-blowing. And when he loses, because, I mean, come on, he lost. Ichi beat him. He was not going to beat Ichi. But when he loses, he just starts crying about how unfair it is that no one gives a shit about him. And this anime makes you feel guilty for taking him for granted. For going, oh yeah, it's just Morikawa's friend. When I think of Morikawa, I think of Morikawa as Izaki's friend now. Because Izaki, oh my god, Izaki's good. I'll go into this in more detail in a future video where I do talk about my favorite Vanguard episode, but oh boy, that episode of Link Joker with Izaki in, go give it a rewatch. It's so good. So, next on the list is Miwa Taishi. For the rest of the characters, I've given pretty in-depth explanations for why I like the characters. I talk about their personality, their development over the course of the series, my changing opinion, how certain characters start off flat but get given development as time progresses. Miwa is the least complex of these characters. Miwa is just, what if we have a side character who's entertaining? Sure, he gets bits and pieces of development later on, but he's just a side character that's entertaining. Miwa was a character I gravitated towards during the beginning of Cardfight Vanguard, when I first started watching it, because a lot of my favorite characters in the entire franchise, as you'll see coming up, had already been introduced at that point, but they hadn't really got given the development they needed yet. Miwa, whilst he gets a little bit of development later on, that's not the point of him. Miwa's just an entertaining character. He's just a fun to watch character. Genuinely, he's the one I'm having the most difficulty kind of describing my like for him, just because he's just Miwa. Miwa is Miwa. And his character even gets changed quite drastically in the reboot. He gets flanderized quite a bit. He turns a bit more loud and obnoxious, and yet he's still entertaining. He's just there. And that's the importance. Not every character in every anime has to get big, long, drawn out character arcs or anything. You can just be entertaining. Miwa, he's just there. He knows his stuff about Vanguard. He's not the loudest in the world about it though, and he only really shows off his skills when he's directly asked to. He's the perfect crowd shot character. And by that I mean, you know how every card game anime has a character in the crowd who like quietly talks about what the effects and strategies and stuff of certain cards are? That's Miwa to a T, and they nailed it. Number 4 is Naoki Ishida. Naoki is, once again, a character that was very much needed. I like him more for what he represents within the franchise as a whole, more than what he actually does as a character. See, when I first started Vanguard, whilst a lot of my favorite characters had already been introduced, not much had really been done for them. I didn't love Team Q4, as controversial as that sounds. They just didn't really work well as a team. I could see what they were going for, but Team Miyagi Academy Cardfight Club, however, they had personality. They worked better. There are some weaker characters in there, don't get me wrong, but Team Miyagi Academy had a lot more energy to them, a lot more clashing emotions, and hey, look, we've got Kourin Tatsunagi finally becoming an interesting character. That was the thing I mentioned earlier in this video. And Naoki is the embodiment of that. Naoki is the second, I guess, member to join the Cardfight Club because Ichi is the first, and Naoki is such an energetic character that really gives the anime a real big breath of fresh air, and that's great. He starts off as a bully that bullies Ichi because, well, you know, Ichi's a nerd that plays card games. Do you really need a reason for him to start bullying him? But something catches Naoki off guard when he realizes that Ichi seems so genuinely passionate about this card game, and so he ends up following him to the card capital after school hours just because he's curious. And through circumstances, Naoki ends up finding himself being taught how to play the game by Ichi unwillingly, and whilst being taught during the course of a practice card fight, Naoki realizes, oh no, I was wrong. I was bullying this kid for the wrong reason. This game actually kicks ass. And because of this, because he feels guilty over bullying Ichi, over not liking this silly card game, he becomes too overprotective of Ichi and only becomes more and more brash and loud as time goes on. And seeing him interact and bounce off of every character that gets introduced from that point on is always a joy to watch. Now, he's nothing too deep. He's got bits and pieces of development here and there, but Naoki was more a case of they'd introduce or set up a new character, a new villain, and my brain would immediately go, oh, I want to see Naoki interact with them. I want to see the kinds of things that Naoki would shout at them for. And every single time I was entertained by it. Naoki is he's just Naoki. I love the Miyagi Academy Cardfight Club, and Naoki is the embodiment of it. He is the heart of that team. He's just a really good, entertaining character, and him being around makes all the characters around him inherently more interesting. So next, number 3. Number 3 is Tokoha Anjo. I just really like Tokoha because she kind of steals the first story arc of G. G seems so desperate to make you care so much about Chrono Shindo and Ibuki and the mystery of how Chrono got his deck in the first place and where is Chrono's dad disappeared to, and Taiyo and Kanzaki and put me to sleep. But then you have Anjo Tokoha, and she very bluntly, very quietly is just, I'm a character in this anime, and my brother's more successful than me, and I'm kind of jealous, and I don't want to live in his shadow. And immediately I am like, you are the most interesting character in this arc. I want to root for you. I want you to kick your brother's ass. And she never truly kicks her brother's ass, but her journey of stepping out of her brother's shadow is great. You just can't help but root for her. She's not the most complex character in the world at this point in time. She's just a nice girl who likes playing Vanguard, who hates that no one acknowledges her because she lives in her brother's shadow, kind of similar to Izaki from earlier. Because of that, she ended up being the most interesting in the main cast, and every new episode of G that I would watch, I would go, please be one focused on Tokoha. Tokoha's way more interesting than any of these other major characters. And that enough is reason for her to be on this list, but things get even more interesting when in G Next, when she's finally starting to feel comfortable that she has started taking her steps out of her brother's shadow and moves to Paris to study, she gets introduced to Miguel, who she immediately seems to fall in love with, and he dies. Just as quickly and suddenly as that, he just dies. Not even anything to do with Vanguard, he just gets ran over. And now Tokoha, now that she's starting to feel comfortable about not being in her brother's shadow anymore, she has to grieve. And I think the thing that makes this so interesting to me too is the fact that just the last thing you'd expect from a card game anime. Like, you'd expect these big sci-fi fantasy plot lines. And yes, this plotline does end up interacting and being important in the sci-fi fantasy stuff later on. But when you're introduced to it, when you see Tokoha acting so happy and going, I made a new friend today, he's great. And then Jamie calls her and he says, yeah, he died. And Tokoha is just like, what? What do you mean? No, that can't happen. And I think the beauty of it is, yeah, that just kind of happens. If you know someone who's been in an accident, been injured or even died, you know that it happens when you least suspect it to. And that's the beauty of it. Life keeps moving whether you want it to or not. Even if you're an anime character for a card game advert, you can still lose loved ones and you can't get them back. And she just kind of has to deal with it. It's so good. Once again, Tokoha, because of this, becomes the character I ended up rooting for most throughout the course of that story arc because, come on, dude, she lost a loved one. I want to see her get over this. I want to see her fully complete the grieving process. And yeah, she kind of gets her ass kicked, but you at least still enjoy her presence and just want her to succeed. Tokoha's the character you feel good for rooting for. There are other characters who are villains or morally grey or this or that, but Tokoha's just the character that you feel good rooting for and wanting to win. And they do it well. I really like Tokoha. She's great. So, 2 characters left. I'd say these are the big 2. Before this point, everything was in no particular order. You could kind of shuffle places number 10 to 3 in any real order, and it wouldn't make much of a difference. 2 and 1, however, those are the 2 big ones. Number 2, you saw the thumbnail, it's Rekha Tatsunagi. I made an entire video about why I like Rekha Tatsunagi. I'll link it in the description. But Rekha's great. Rekha's so good. And I'm kind of finding myself at a loss for words to explain what it is about her that really works so well, because no one else really seems to gravitate to her the same way I do. She is a combination of a lot of my favorite aspects of these past characters. She's got the general all-around entertainingness of Miwa. Every scene she's in is fun to watch. She's a character that you look forward to seeing her clash with and argue with and interact with, like Naoki. Just like Naoki, whenever I was introduced to a new character in the Vanguard anime, I would go, oh, I can't wait for Rekha to interact with them. And it was a crime that she was never brought back for G or Gears Crisis, because seeing old Rekha interact with Rummy Labyrinth would have been the best episode of any anime ever made. And she was also a character that didn't really even impact me at first, but exploded, I guess. In the first story arc, she comes off similar to Suiko and Kourin as just kind of there, as very detached, as very mysterious. And then, right at the beginning of the Asia Circa arc, she kicks Misaki's ass, tells her that her deck is outdated, and has fun doing it. And it's so entertaining to see the facade. The facade is amazing. The facade is the idea that she's supposed to be this fun, cheery idol who is supposed to be like the symbol of innocence and purity, and yet she constantly acts like an asshole. She's sarcastic. She enjoys taking the piss out of others. It's just amazing. And I think the thing that works the most about it is it's, again, the kind of thing you wouldn't expect to see. When I first ran into her, in the first episode she ended up appearing in the anime, while she was kind of entertaining, I never expected her to become that. And the fact that she does just become that out of nowhere works so well. She's just a really entertaining character. Please, Bushiroad, if we ever do get around to that G reboot, you gotta bring back old Rekha. old time skip Rekha and have an episode or something where she hangs out with Rummy Labyrinth and takes the piss out of them, it would be the best thing ever. If I can have one wish, that would be it. And number one is one, come on, number one's obvious, it's Ichi Sendo. Ichi is a character that lives up to the hype. He really is. He's almost everyone's unanimously favorite character, or at the very least, he's in everyone's top 10, I feel like. And I knew this before I even saw the anime, and at first I wasn't feeling it. I was like, is this really all he is? Is he really this dull? And then he ended up living up to the hype, and then some. Ichi Sendo is such a fantastic protagonist and one of the best ones ever written. He starts off as a shy nerd who's too nervous to even play Cardfight Vanguard because he has no one to play with. And then he is forced to, through circumstances, play for his life to get his best card back. And through this, he starts slowly coming out of his shell, getting better at the card game, learning and progressing. The cool thing about this is he starts off kinda shit. He loses a lot. Like a lot. And he slowly progresses and gets better as time goes on. He slowly learns about new cards and new mechanics and new clans. And he's the perfect audience point of view character. As he learns, the audience learns. He enters tournaments, he gets friends, and then he becomes the best card fighter. He wins the Asia Circuit tournament. And that's only the beginning. Ichi is now the best card fighter, and then he has to go back to the real world again. He has to go to school. He has to learn to socialize again. Earlier, he'd been bonding with people over the mutual love of Vanguard. That was the thing that got him to come out of his shell. He had been getting more and more talkative because he had a hobby that he really liked that he could talk to others about. What if that gets taken away from him? Not literally, because he can still play Vanguard, but what if he gets put in a school where no one gives a shit? And then Kourin ends up joining the school and he ends up clinging to her like it's nobody's business, which ends up sparking Kourin's character arc, the one we talked about earlier. And then Naoki comes into the picture, which again, we talked about earlier. And now Ichi needs to learn to get more confident even without Vanguard, because he needs to convince the student council that, you know, his hobby is worth a damn. And Ichi only continues to keep growing from there. He's a character that's really fun to watch. He is a very different type of protagonist. He's very quiet, but that works. He learns as the audience learns. He's good. He's competent. Whenever he fails, it feels real. It feels like a real failure. It doesn't just feel like an asspull. And when he wins, it usually feels like a real earned victory too. He actually uses strategy. His development is just so satisfying to see because it takes so long. Most other animes would have him get to the point where he is the best card fighter in the world, you know, within 50 episodes. Or they would have had that be the end of the character entirely, but that ends up just being the beginning. And seeing him change and grow even into G when they bring him back in G, and see him even continue to grow further is just great. He's a really likable character. He's really fun to watch. We've all been through this before. We all know why everyone likes Ichi so much. And those are my 10. There may be some fairly obvious omissions, but I could only fit 10 in. And those are genuinely the 10 that I gravitated towards most. I don't usually encourage comments because I just don't really talk about that stuff. I'm very awkward about it. But this is definitely one where if I was ever to want you to comment on a video, this is definitely one. I want to see which characters you like and why, and if any of these deserve their own video, because I do know that I made an entire video about Ichi and Rekha in the past and why I like those characters. So maybe some of these could. Izaki's definitely getting one at some point, and that's a video I've been planning out for a while. But yeah, those are my favorite characters. Hopefully you stuck around this long, to anyone who did. Really appreciate it. And I will be seeing you later with some more Shinemon episode reviews.